Hello, everyone, and welcome to the finalist voting for the Maven Tour de France Challenge. I want to start by welcoming Alice to the panel. For anyone that doesn't know, she's Maven's new instructor and the author of our first ever applied data science course. So make sure to check that out. It's pretty awesome. Welcome, Alice. All right, now let's get started and on to the Tour de France. We now actually know that Jonas Vingegaard, if that's how it's pronounced, won the race this year. But we've still got to settle the real thing. So let's actually get to it here. Now, the challenge objective, which is what we'll use as the criteria for the voting, was the following. So for the Maven Tour de France Challenge, you'll be playing the role of a data visualization expert at the Amari Sport Organization, the company that organizes the annual Tour de France cycling race. So while the Tour de France is one of the most watched live sporting events in the world, most viewership actually comes from European countries. So your goal as a participant is to help increase the race's popularity around the world by creating an infographic style visual to educate new viewers, highlight the magnitude of the event, and build anticipation for this year's race. Now, if we look at the data, you'll see that we're working with a historical data set on every Tour de France from 1903 to 2022, so not this year, including details on the stages, distance, entrance, finishers, and winning times for each year. Now you can scroll through the nearly 200 submissions down here. And if you participated and don't see your entry here, just make sure to go to your project settings and select the Maven Tour de France Challenge so it's submitted properly and you can see it here. And we can consider it for voting the next time around. Now, we've actually already gone through these. We've got a list of the 5 finalists that we're going to be evaluating today, but I'd also like to call out some honorable mentions. So let me do that now. First up, we've got Gabriel Gravides, who had a great execution of the newspaper style report, which we actually saw others do as well, but we liked this one a lot particularly. Now, Marjoline focused on 5 key reasons to watch the tour this year, and then provided figures to go with each one, which was a really clean report. Praval Ranjan Goswami used kind of a captivating design that almost felt like it deserved to be printed out and hung on a wall for people to read and learn about the event. I know, Lauren, you mentioned that. Then we've got Gerard, who focused on a single retro style visual that aimed to engage audience outside of Europe, which is kind of what the challenge was all about, by appealing to their competitive side and seeing if they could take on Europe in their own backyard. And finally, Saeed Sheikh had a very creative use of small multiples with a custom chart that compared each edition using these 5 key factors. So those are the honorable mentions for the Maven Tour de France Challenge. Now let's dig into the 5 finalists, starting with Selena Vaughn.
I am really excited to be able to walk through Selena Vaughn's challenge entry today. I think that she did some really great work, especially in terms of fulfilling the prompt requirement to increase the Tour de France's popularity around the world. In terms of Selena's project description, I really liked that she clearly laid out her objective. I liked the fact that she kind of explained exactly how she was going to make the event more relatable outside of Europe. And she kind of broke down a couple of the ways that she's planning on doing that, using, both metric and imperial systems to kind of incentivize other people outside of Europe to have a better understanding of what was going on, giving context, and especially drawing comparisons to other events. I thought that was a really, really cool way to kind of fulfill that prompt challenge. I also really liked her reasoning behind using this road graphic that you'll see in just a second to kind of draw the viewer's eye. I think that, we often talk about like a Z or an F formation when laying out dashboards. And I think that Selena's road graphic does something very similar in terms of like, those graphics or those dashboard layouts that we might see in an executive dashboard. We're really being told exactly how to look at this particular presentation. And I thought that was a really great way to do that. I also just, before I dive into it, I've also not seen this particular setup before where Selena built everything in Power BI in terms of the data cleaning analysis and everything, but then she used Canva to put it all together into this infographic, which I thought was a really, really cool use case. So jumping into her actual visualization, We can kind of start from the top. So she has her infographic separated into 6 very distinct sections. She has the event, the history, the course, the distance, the speed, and then finally her index section where she kind of explained some of the outside sources that she used. I think there's a couple of things that Selena did really, really well here to particularly make that Tour de France accessible to people outside of Europe. So going back up to the top, some things that I thought she did really well were her consistent use of both metric and imperial systems. You'll kind of see here, she talked about 3,570 miles or 5,745 kilometers. She did that across the board. So every time there was any kind of distance comparison, she made sure to include both. I really, really liked her comparison to other major events. So kind of going all the way back up to the top. Selena mentions that the first Tour de France was in 1903, which was actually the same year that the first Wright brothers manned flight was completed, which I thought was just a really cool way to kind of put things in context. Generally, other things that I really enjoyed were her really clear use of graphics. I think that she really focused on making sure that this was something that everybody could read. So things like using these cyclist icons to kind of show the average completion rate of the race. Her use of things like comparing the race distance to the very famous Route 66 in the United States, again, trying to make things accessible outside of Europe. Her very interesting comparison between, winning rider speeds versus a rabbit, a lion. I thought that was really cool, and it really kind of put things into context. And then one of the other really cool ones that I thought that I had not seen anywhere else was this kind of equivalency of the highest peak in the French Alps that the riders are going through is equivalent to nearly 1,000 flights of stairs, which was like just entirely mind-blowing for me, but also really put things into perspective. Finally, and this one was just kind of more fun than anything else, you'll see at the very bottom, she did mention that in 1989, Laurent Fignon lost by 8 seconds, and an experiment later suggested that his ponytail might have caused that loss, which I just thought was a really fun fact to throw in. So generally, Selena's infographic really shines for me. It does exactly what she intended. She draws the eye through this visualization in a really interesting way. And I kept finding more and more things to kind of look at as I went through it, which is kind of why I'm going up and down and all around, because it was kind of the way that I explored this a little bit. I would have loved to maybe see a little bit more information about the cyclists themselves, maybe this year's race, especially because she did originally throw in things about this year's race, including, the map. So I think that it would be really cool to have some history about previous winners, maybe hopefuls for 23, the distance of the 2023 race, anything like that, especially because her about section states that her goal specifically was to build the anticipation and viewership of this event. But overall, I felt like it was really comprehensive and well thought out. I think that what Selena did impeccably was really keep the prompt in mind as she built it out. So you can see that again and again with her use of added context, those comparisons to major events. So Selena, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to kind of go through your project. It was a lot of fun to look at.
All right, perfect. So up next, we've got Liliana's submission here. And again, I'm going to kind of jump into the dashboard here in just a moment, but the about this project section, I think she did a really good job here of setting the stage and talking about some of the main or major kind of takeaways from her dashboard. Again, a lot of this stuff is pretty obvious and apparent when you actually look at it, but I think she does a really good job at talking about some of the nuances and the way that she approached the design of this infographic style dashboard here. So one of the things that I really wanted to kind of call out here is the comparison piece here with the chart that she is using to compare the two riders and how she is actually using the x-axis labels of the different stages instead of using like dates to represent that. Again, we'll see that actual example within her dashboard here, but I think that it's a small detail, but she accomplishes it really well, and it really helps draw the user in and make it, feel more like an infographic versus just having like stage names or dates or something like that. So again, the about this project section, pretty well done. And again, this is just kind of a good way to warm people up, I would say, before they jump directly into the dashboard. So jumping right in here, think starting off, Liliana did an amazing job really following the challenge prompt, and she created this fabulous kind of infographic style dashboard it's not only just visually appealing, but it really also displays a bunch of great information and facts about the tour over its history. From a visual standpoint, I really like how Liliana, she used the French flag here as a background, and it's prominent, yet it's subtle enough where it adds a really nice touch and it doesn't distract you when you're viewing the report, right? So it adds that nice aesthetic to the report without having it be too jarring. Also, the font and the logo, it's kind of great branding touches here. Again, it's just really well designed, it's really well put together. So there's a couple of subtle pieces there that I really like from an overall layout and design standpoint. The second piece here is again the road layout. I know that we saw this used in a lot of the different challenge submissions, and Lauren had already mentioned this about, you know, that typical F or Z pattern for a layout. Again, I still think that this is a very logical layout to use. Again, something that's circular or follows that kind of clockwise motion on how you would view, kind of view or interpret this. Again, that's a very logical way for folks to really interpret or read through this type of visual. So here, she's included a bunch of different great data points, really helps draw attention to the tour. And again, thinking about the challenge prompt here, you know, there's some really great insights and facts here that, you know, for folks that aren't diehard cycling fans or haven't followed the tour, you know, year to year, you know, it may give them a reason to actually tune in, right? Hey, is this year going to be one of the longest distance races? Are we going to see some of the highest completion rates this year? Is there going to be a new average speed record set this year, right? So those kinds of things, I think it's all a fascinating way to kind of display that timeline style information in a non-linear, meaning left to right way, and also promote interest in what's happening there. One small thing to point out here is in 2016, this insight or this data point here says the most riders or the most starters to finish the race at 12%. It's just a little bit backwards there, right? So it's actually, it would be 86%, or excuse me, 88% finished, right? 12% dropout rate. So again, very minor piece there. But again, if somebody was going through and scanning this, the percentage doesn't necessarily make sense with the insight there. So again, just a little QA thing there to make sure that, you know, all the percentages match up with what you're intending to present as the insight. And then lastly, really kind of want to talk about the center of the visual here, where we've got that head-to-head comparison, and then the kind of favorability between Yona and Tade. So in my opinion, the comparison between the two riders by stage is really just fantastic, right? And that's what I was talking about, using the mountain stages or the different stages of the Tour de France as the x-axis instead of using those as dates. It's super easy to interpret, and the line charts by their rank, it really just helps you kind of better understand exactly how the riders are performing compared to each other by stage, right? So again, very easy to interpret here. I also love this 2023 kind of call out here. You can see that at the start of it, you know, folks are saying, hey, Tade and Jonas are basically equal, right? They're given equal chance of winning the tour. Couple of weeks in, we see that Tade is, you know, kind of the favorite. And then shortly after that, Jonas is, you know, clearly far ahead of the field and ultimately ends up winning the Tour de France for a second year in a row. But I really liked this kind of breakout visual and kind of condensing that timeline into kind of key data points there. So overall, I really like this. Really awesome job, Liliana. I can honestly say that if I came across this visual outside of the challenge, that I'd certainly stop and, you know, kind of read through it and take it all in. I think it's kind of got that stopping power to make people look at it and want to dig into it. So very, very well done.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Ante's work. If you take just a look at the page itself, it may not seem as flamboyant or artistic as some of the others that we've seen, but actually, in a few minutes, I'm going to show you that this is really a complete work. So just starting with a really thought out title, so not generic at all. I love this image, sort of like a cover image, and I love that it's not a big lift. So this is something that we would consider a good practice. It's just a piece of his entire work that he's repurposed for sort of like a prompt or a hook, if you will, to capture the attention of the viewer right off the bat. So really clever way, maybe takes a couple of minutes of work and adds a ton of value. I'm going to reiterate stuff that folks who came before me said, and please, everybody, use the About To section of the your profiles. It's really there for a reason, and just having stuff here sends a ton of good notions and good thoughts about how you worked about it and the work you put into it. It really speaks volumes about everything that you did. In this particular case, you will see this in a minute. So Ante sort of split his work into units, and he uses the About section of the project to explain what his thoughts were about what each of those units should achieve. So we have stuff like introduction, structure of the race, distance, percentage, all of this stuff. You can read it, and I invite you to do so. It's really interesting. So now taking this from the top, it's just a classic top to bottom layout, really easy to read, really easy to go over. So we have like a little bit of a history of the event itself, just a few sentences. Again, really easy to take in, just meant to hook you into the whole thing. And then probably my favorite part is this structure of the race here. Now, usually what was happening as I was going through the entries in these challenges, people would drag the timeline through an entire 100-something years. So we had either a circular motion or a line charts on a flat x-axis, but either way, we were looking at what I think is a very granular approach to the whole event. Now he bucketed this into 20 years interval, and then we are able to see really easily how the structure of the race changed over time. I don't think we necessarily lose any of the value, because if you think about it, it's an infographic. It's supposed to, on a high level, educate people who are not as familiar with the race itself. And I don't think it has to be as granular. So I really I think this is a very intelligent solution to sort of condense the data a little bit, but not lose any of the. Personally, for me, this stacked bar is, I would easily say, top 5, if not top 3 in the entire challenge. And then we get to the distance part. Very simple, big numbers, huge numbers, because those are huge accomplishments. So think about this. Person sat on their bike for 4,000 kilometers and rode it. So there is really no better way to just hammer you in the head than using a huge font. Again, another big number is 63%. So out of all the people, over 60% actually managed to do this. So 63% of all participants managed to drive their bikes for 4,000 kilometers. I love how simple this is, and yet again how powerful this is. It speaks about the importance. It speaks about just the size of the achievement from an individual point of view. Again, we have this bucketed chart here. Very intelligent solution. So we see this is in fact the progress of finishers. So in the 90s, only 37% of anybody who entered actually finished the race. Today, actually in 2020s, it's about 80%. So we can see, again, not by focusing on each year, we can see a clear trend, a strong trend upwards to see how much we have progressed as sportists, as competitors. Now, some people were asking questions, what's behind this, and they're right to do so. You can argue better equipment, more science progress, all of that stuff. But again, this may not be the topic of this particular challenge, right? So we are here to educate, to present facts, and to rouse an interest, ideally to people who are not already familiar. Now, map, anybody who knows me knows that I'm not a huge fan of map visuals. And initially I was going to discard it completely, but it actually does a very good job in this case. The idea here is to color the countries that have had a finisher in a Tour de France over the years. And it does exactly that. So you can see this huge yellow area, which indicates just how widespread this event is. My problem with the map specifically is that I think it skews the results a little bit. So if you think about it, let's look at the left-hand side. So it's Canada, it's United States, it's Argentina, Brazil. So those are 4 countries accounting for maybe even 50% of the whole map. Add in Russia, add in Australia, China. Now all of a sudden you have like 70% of everything, but you're just at maybe what, 7-8 countries. I'm not saying it's wrong. I actually think that keeping the simple approach with just big numbers would achieve even more here. Couple the map with its inherent flaw, because all of the 2D maps have to be distorted. I think it's just the picture that it paints maybe a little bit off. Again, it does what the author intended it to do. I would say constructive feedback would be to maybe keep up with the style that he had before that. It was really working very well. So moving to the bottom half, again, some big numbers. Again, we see the awesome progress that we have made. Finally, we are introduced to some of the most important players, the most important teams, some of the most recent winners. And at the end, as the final piece of the challenge prompt, he's trying to arouse the interest for this year's race. If I was looking at this in May or March or something like that, again, I'm faced with this big number where I can see that I still have time to view that after I have learned everything that I have watching everything that he added in his work before. One final piece that I'm going to add that we have not yet seen, and I think to me it is important. A lot of the people added information about the years that the Tour de France didn't take place. So the World Wars, the Lance Armstrong case and stuff like that. And while that isn't wrong, I think that actually by omitting that data, he's answering the challenge prompt better. So we shouldn't, if the idea is to promote the event, we don't have to touch on that kind of a detail. It doesn't add any promotional value to me. Of course, it's important to learn it. Of course, it's important to be aware of it, but I think it's not exactly necessary in this kind of visual. So overall, I think he hits all the stops, and I think it's a very neat piece of work here from Ante.
Okay, this was a really fun project to review. I would say, first off, I love the title. It drew me in right away. And then as I was going through the about this project, I feel like the storytelling here is so great. So I love that the first sentence is that the main objective is to bring the life of the rich history of the Tour de France. Bring to life the rich history of the Tour de France. So that immediately brought me in. And then as I was going through how the infographic was structured, I was really impressed by how thoughtful every piece was. So Yasmin talked about on the left-hand side, there's certain things going on versus the right-hand side. And then as I was going through this, I saw that certain unique calculations were made, such as calculating the podium to number of starts ratio or the BMI. And I saw that more as I was going through the infographic. And one of the most surprising things for me was just Excel was the main tool and PowerPoint was used for design, because this infographic is so beautiful. I was surprised that you could use something like PowerPoint to create this. Yasmin, if you have any tips for using PowerPoint for design, please message me. But let's dive into the infographic. So I want to just go through how I walk through this infographic, because one thing that's really interesting to me when I'm looking at these things is just how the audience will walk through it, because you have a goal in mind when you're creating visualization, but it's usually different than what people actually do when they walk through it. So when I saw this, the first thing I saw was, wow, there's this creative character here that's really engaging me and bringing me into this infographic. Okay, so that's fun immediately. And then as I look at this infographic from a high level, I see a lot of text on the left. So for me personally, I actually ignored that from the start. And then I read that at the end, because what happened for me is I looked at this and I thought, okay, well, the first thing is I see these general stats over here. And I love these general stats to start because they really pull people in with like in a very simple way. So just looking at the things here, I saw that there have been a lot of participants. There's so many viewers, 4x bigger than the Super Bowl, things like that. That's really drawing in this international audience. And then as I was going down, I like how the next visual was a graphic, because after you go through just these numbers, the next one being a graphic just kind of changes it up. And then this one was really easy for me to read because of the color highlighting here. I was able to see, okay, the race distance is spiked up. And then, yeah, there were a lot of dropouts here. So I was able to discover that through the visualization, which I think is always a great part of visuals, is when you can have the user discover something and then they feel really smart for discovering it. So I thought that was a great example there. And then for the dominant winners and countries, this one I thought was just really interesting, looking at the first, second, and third place. This is my only criticism of this whole infographic is the person that was pointed out here was Bernard, and then Bernard was number 3 here. And then I just was thinking, like, why are they the third person in this list? Because their PTSR, this podium to start ratio, was higher. And then I realized, oh, I think this is ordered by year 1. So that was just one thing that was a little bit, took me a little bit more to understand, but I still think this is a great visual. And then these visualizations here, I really liked the titles. I love it when the title isn't something like, this is a bar chart or this is a pie chart, but it's actually telling me what I should be getting from the visual. So this is saying lower BMI is competitive advantage. And then I just thought this was so interesting with this US average over here. It's just like a great reference point. And then finally, to wrap it all up, this last visual, I love how it's about the 2023 tour, because that's really drawing people into the current day. So this was just an excellent situation where the data storytelling was really on point. And then after I read all the visuals, then I went to the left and I read all the commentary and I was laughing out loud. And I thought this was so creative. It read like a novel, and it was just really like a fun and fresh way of creating data visualizations. So really, really well done here.
All right, so let me just start by clicking on this so you guys can see the full entry, because to me, at least, it feels like one of those that should be in some sort of like a data viz museum if anyone ever decides to make one, which really is no surprise then that Tableau actually decided to make it its viz of the week when Kate first published this. So it focuses on 6 key aspects of the race, but it presents them in this really creative and stunning visual, which kind of resembles like other people did, but this is more of like a winding road kind of from the top. They're all from the top down, but I don't know how this just felt like a longer road to me for some reason than the other kind of circular tracks. But that's just me maybe. But what I do love about it beyond that is that it's using 6 different circle-shaped charts, which are really hard to pull off, but actually I think work great here. So first you've got the grand departs, which highlight where the race has started outside of France throughout the years. You've got the composition of the terrain here, which kind of shows how these stages have evolved in the race throughout the years. You've got the numbers of participants or finishers, if you decide to use this toggle in their published dashboard throughout the years. And you've got the start, the gaps with the 2 world wars, and then kind of how participation has grown. You've got the distance with the shortest, which were the first 2, and the longest races highlighted. And you can also see how the kind of distance has trended down as the additions have, gotten a little bit more recent. We've got the speed of the races here, which are now 1.6 times faster than when the race started in 1903. And finally, we've got the winners' nationalities, which, as you all know by now, since we've seen all these entries, are mostly European. So if we close out of this, which I almost don't want to because I love looking at it, you'll see that the About This Project section isn't as fleshed out as I'd like, and certainly not as detailed as some of our other finalists. I would have loved more insight into how all of this was created, because I'd like to try to replicate it someday. But Kate does highlight how each aspect of the visual addresses the prompt. So the educating new viewers, highlighting the magnitude. And while I did feel like the visual itself doesn't really build anticipation for this year's event, which was part of the prompt, it does call out that it's been shared on 2 online platforms where it got over 10,000 views, which kind of does achieve that. So that was pretty clever to kind of tie that in here and address maybe the missing piece of her visual, but is essentially part of her project altogether. So yeah, overall amazing entry, and the kind I think I personally always wish we get when we build a challenge like this one. So great work. That's all the finalists. Now, before we move on to the selection process, I really just want to quickly recap the challenge prompt and criteria. We're looking for the best infographic style visual that educates new viewers, highlights the magnitude of the event, and builds anticipation for this year's Tour de France, which is now concluded. And we are judging in terms of a complete project. So not just the visual itself, but every element on the project page is actually going to play a part. Now, having said all that, does anyone have any strong initial preferences?
Yeah, I'm thinking how this is hard. Typically, I have at least like 1 or 2 or 3 that I want to sort of promote, but Lawrence sold me already from the start on Selena's entry, specifically with the clever use of comparisons. So I don't think there is a better way. If you want to educate person who doesn't know anything about cycling, then you are going to compare to stuff like rabbits or lions, or make some sort of real world comparison, which everybody can understand. I'm not from the United States. I know what Route 66 is, stuff like that. So, and having seen all of these entries, I don't even remember that people were so quick to do that. If anybody did it, then Selena is in a rare company at best. So I would definitely give points for that.
Oh, and I was going to say, I really liked Ante's too. I think that one thing that I really enjoyed is I feel like as much as we talk about data visualization and, this being an infographic, he used the data in a really clever way. So he's still like giving us numbers, giving us information about, like using stacked bar charts, using, as much as we may or may not like them, our maps or like line charts. I think that was really cleverly done. And so it kind of tied really well together, both like the infographic portion of things, but also all of the data that he was provided.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. So for Ante and Jasmine, I think 2 of the things that stuck out here to me is, again, thinking about the challenge prompt, the goal here is to get people that are, kind of external or to the kind of cycling world of Tour de France to become interested in this, right? And I think one way to do that is with a very cleverly or well-designed dashboard, right? From a visual standpoint, you can draw people in. But then where the rubber meets the road, we'll use bike puns here. I think that Jasmine and Ante both provide some examples of where you could start digging into other reasons. Like it basically starts to let the individual that's viewing the report start to ask why, right? Why was the ponytail the reason that that guy lost by 8 seconds, right? Why was the advent of like sports nutrition like a big factor? Like, and we start to get some of the insight into that, things like the increases in bike technology, right? Rider performance. Hey, we determined that smoking cigarettes and drinking red wine after the tour doesn't actually really help with lung capacity or open blood vessels and all that kind of stuff, right? Go figure. But again, like it starts to, get the person to thinking about like, okay, what are these things that are changing as the tour evolves beyond just distances, and the layout of the tour and that kind of stuff. So I think I like both of those projects for those reasons, where they're a little bit thought provoking, where it's like, okay, what are some of these reasons behind some of the increases in the times and the speeds and these data points that are being presented? And I think they do it in a very clear and concise way. Specifically with Jasmine, their report is hilarious, right? Alice, I know you mentioned about this, but like reading the comments on the left-hand side there, it's just like take 10 minutes, however quickly you read through that stuff. It is so well done and clever. I think from an overall standpoint, right now, kind of Jasmine's got my vote for the top dashboard here. I think from a visual layout standpoint, it's really well done. But then when you actually dig into the content and are reading through everything, it really captures and kind of captivates you. And you want to, you start asking why you're really interested in it. So I think this is kind of, out of the 5 that we've reviewed here, the one that I would say does the best kind of comprehensive job of getting people to be interested in it.
Yeah, for me, in terms of which ones really stood out, I would say first Kate's really stood out to me because that one was just so visually pleasing. Like I think if I saw these 5 visualizations, like these 5 infographics on a wall, like which one would I immediately want to read? And this is the one. So I would say from a visualization standpoint, this is the one where I'm like, oh, okay, I want to learn more. So that one stands out to me. And then also, I guess I reviewed his, but Yasmin's really stood out to me too, just like upon like reading it and then I guess like digging into it and spending some time with it more. That one drew me in more. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah.
As I've said, this is hard.
It is hard. I think it's a very diverse kind of set of finalists, I think. Lauren Branislav, I agree with you that the context kind of provided in Salinas is something that I was looking for from the start, and that, to your point, Branislav, no one really did. I mean, some people did provide some context, but I think this like really puts it into terms that any human being can understand the magnitude, of the event. Like it's more than, riding Route 66 on a bike. In fact, it's 150 miles more, and they ride faster, than a rabbit at their fastest and things like that. That just makes it a lot more impressive, I think, than just like flat out stating the speeds and the distances and things like that. I will say, I know we haven't talked about Liliana's yet, but I love that they included stats for the current race as it progressed and kind of, compared it to the previous edition, which was very similar, added the changes in odds and had the changes in times. And you can see how it started to get a better advantage here. And I love the fun facts all around the racetrack. And yeah, Yasmin, he's got his style, I mean, for anyone that remembers his winning Space Challenge entry, it was very similar to this one in its narrative style. Maybe that one drew more of an emotional response just because of its nature. But he's really got this style down, and I think it does kind of engage the viewer in a very unique way that I think no one else really does as well as he. And I agree with Alice Cates. It just breaks my heart that this isn't as fleshed out, because I think it ultimately kind of detracts from her project. But the visual itself is just, I can't believe
the visual is
someone did
amazing.
this.
Whatever happens, I'm going to be not disappointed, but sorry. On one hand, it sort of lacks some figures, some more information on it. On the other hand, if it were there, it would probably be cluttered and not as pretty, not as beautiful, and ultimately not as readable. From a technical perspective, this is just a work of art. I as you said, I cannot. This is probably the one I watched the most. Just amazing. And
Alright,
we're
so
back to square one, by the way. We
Yeah,
don't
I mean,
have
it
clear
looks like
idea.
the strongest feelings have come for Yasmin's, Selena's, and Ante's, maybe kind of in this order so far, if everyone kind of agrees with that. I think maybe given the about this project section here, we maybe exclude Kate from the voting, unless someone is opposed to that. We could very well do a four-way vote. But maybe we vote between these three. How's
Yeah, I
everyone
think that
feeling?
feels right.
I would be okay with that.
Lauren, Alice?
Yeah, I think that's great.
All right. So does everyone have their vote? We're going to do, Alice, this is your first time, so we do just finger on the screen. You don't have a virtual background, so you don't need to put it directly in front of your face, but if you don't, it can get lost. So yeah, we'll do 1 for Yasmin, 2 for Selena, 3 for Ante. If everyone's ready, I think we can vote. Thumbs up. Okay. 1, 2, 3. So we have a tie between Yasmin and Selena, which means Branislav. Tell us your thoughts.
Okay,
or just your fingers.
so it's between 1 Jasmine and 2 Selena.
That's right.
2 very, very good entries. To your guys' point, Jasmine is really hilarious. And for me personally, to a degree, maybe a little bit too relaxed with his language. Selena, on the other hand, gave us a really, really detailed work. And it is an infographic, and I do really like the comparisons that she pulled out and everything that she has going for it. So I'm just going to pull up 2 fingers and cast my vote there.
It looks like Selena takes it then. Congratulations. Let's give them a round of applause. Nice little silent Zoom applause.
Yes.
All right, so Selena, as a prize, you'll be taking home a free annual membership to Maven Analytics, and for the first time ever, a $100 Amazon gift card. We'll message you about that, and a custom Maven Challenge winner t-shirt. So congratulations. I don't think we have a yellow edition, which would be nicely for the Tour de France challenge. Maybe we do, so make sure to check that out. I know you can pick it yourself. So congratulations. That's it for this challenge. Thanks again to everyone that continues to participate. Got a lot more in store for you guys, so stay tuned. And thanks, everyone.